Biblical scholars have argued for years about the location of these holy sites. Now, one man says he might have found them.
Mount Sinai has been one of history's biggest wonders for such a long time. Then a next-level drone with ground-penetrating radar over 100 times stronger than the old stuff flew over the rugged peaks, and things got real. Beneath the rocky surface, it picked up shapes and patterns never seen with the naked eye, showing details researchers had always suspected were there. The coolest part? The drone didn't change the story, it just confirmed what everyone already guessed all along. Where is it exactly located then? The location that makes the most sense. Mount Sinai has been talked about for thousands of years, but the funny thing is, no one ever fully agreed on where it actually is. People argued, explorers wandered, maps changed, and theories spread everywhere. Yet, when you look at the evidence with fresh eyes, one place stands out far more naturally than the rest: the northwest corner of Saudi Arabia. That region, especially around the towering dark rock peaks near Jabal Makla and Jebel al-Lawz, fits the story in a way that just makes sense without complicated explanations. It's rugged, volcanic, scorched-looking on the top, impossible to climb on certain sides, and surrounded by long valleys that match ancient travel routes. Even before high-tech tools entered the picture, anyone who visited that area felt the same thing. This place doesn't look ordinary. People have always imagined Mount Sinai as a lonely, intimidating mountain with a grand presence, something that naturally commands attention. When you stand in front of the dark peaks in Saudi Arabia, that's exactly the feeling you get. The mountain has sharp edges, deep natural terraces, and a kind of silent heaviness that makes you stop talking without thinking about it. For a long time, researchers quietly pointed to this region, not because they wanted to prove something, but because the landscape simply matched descriptions passed down for centuries. The terrain, the distances, the layout of valleys, and even the look of the summit lined up with older accounts more comfortably than the traditional locations on tourist maps. Here's another thing that makes this area feel more reasonable: the path leading to it. If a group were traveling from Egypt toward the Arabian side, the natural trails and water sources lead learners almost directly toward the modern-day Saudi border. The old trade routes curved in that direction. It's the kind of geography that doesn't require imagination, it just works. You can trace the plains wide enough for large groups, the dry riverbeds that once held water, and the natural turns that would guide ancient travelers straight into the mountains. But what really makes this location feel realistic is the mountain's personality. It's harsh. It doesn't welcome you with soft scenery. The rock is black in places, like burnt stone. The slopes are steep, and the wind cuts across the cliffs like it's carving the air. It isn't the kind of mountain you casually hike up, it's the kind you approach carefully. And that challenge is part of its identity. Even older historical notes describe a mountain that felt overwhelming but significant. And this one fits that description without trying. Of course, the story of Mount Sinai is centuries old, and people have tried to track it for just as long. In ancient times, travelers talked about a powerful mountain somewhere past the wilderness regions, past the deserts where only nomads would survive. Later, when maps grew more formal, historians placed Sinai in the Sinai Peninsula, mostly because it was convenient, not because people verified it through the ground or through deep study. For centuries, that location stuck out of tradition rather than actual matching details. Over time, explorers, scientists, and historians walked both sides of the region, the peninsula and the Arabian territories, and many quietly noted that the Saudi side felt far more convincing. The mountains there look aged but dramatic, marked by weather and time. The area has wide-open plains suitable for camps, strong wind channels, and natural rock formations that almost form natural boundaries. It has cliffs that look like something extraordinary happened there. You don't need to embellish anything. The land speaks for itself. But before drones and advanced equipment, people could only guess what lay under the ground. They could only react to what they saw on the surface: rocks, paths, cliffs, caves. They didn't know what was under the layers of hardened earth. They couldn't see patterns or structures buried deep below. They couldn't identify unusual formations hidden beneath centuries of dust and sediment. That's the limitation of early archaeology. It relied heavily on what was visible and rarely what was hidden. The mountain's history is long, way longer than modern borders or national names. In older times, the entire region between Egypt, the Sinai Peninsula, and northwest Arabia was a network of movement. Herds passed through. Traders crossed back and forth. Caravans traveled with goods. People fleeing danger moved through the desert. The area wasn't empty. It was a major travel zone. So the idea of a significant event happening on the Arabian side isn't out of place at all. It fits the ancient world better than the simplified map lines we follow today. And that's why, when modern researchers decided to scan the mountain, they didn't do it randomly. They didn't spin a globe and drop a pin anywhere. They went to the location that had the most natural alignment with geography, history, travel routes, and landscape. They went to Saudi Arabia because the place itself already had more weight and more matching characteristics than any other suggested site. The mountain didn't feel like a guess. It felt like the right answer waiting for technology to confirm it. The drone team specifically chose this location because its massive ridges, deep-cut valleys, and thick crust of hardened rock were perfect for advanced scanning. The mountain's composition made it extremely difficult to study with older tools. Traditional excavation would barely scratch the surface. Even older radar systems struggled to penetrate the dense layers of stone. But this new radar drone, 100 times stronger than anything used before, could finally look past the surface. It could look into the mountain's hidden layers. The region around Jabal Maqla also has long lines of ancient lava fields and volcanic formations that make it more dramatic and scientifically interesting. The dark stone near the summit, for example, gives the mountain a burned appearance that captures attention instantly. People who see it for the first time often say it looks like something happened here, and while that's more of an impression than an evidence-based statement, the emotion behind it matters. It reflects the mountain's natural impact. The place feels old, heavy, and meaningful. The more someone learns about it, the more they realize that the mountain stands as a landmark that shaped movements, stories, and generations. Its environment suggests gatherings at its base. Its elevation gives clear visibility over long distances. Its isolation made it a perfect meeting point in ancient times. And its natural features explain why thousands of years of storytelling anchored themselves around a place just like this. So, before the drone ever took off, this area was already the most sensible location. The land, the history, the geography, the travel patterns, all of it pointed here long before machines confirmed anything. Modern radar didn't create the conversation. It just finally allowed us to see what's been sitting under the surface the entire time. Correct. Just when things seemed wild enough, the gear got an upgrade. The scanning with better technology. When the team finally got the green light to run the GPR flights over Mount Sinai's Saudi side ridges, the mood shifted from excited guessing to full-on execution mode. Everyone understood how unusual this moment was. A remote patch of rugged mountains that had been off-limits for decades was about to be scanned with the most advanced drone-based subsurface tech ever used in that region. Unlike typical survey work, this mission needed to be flawless on the first try. The drone wasn't just expensive, it had limited window time. The weather was unpredictable, and the clearance to fly in that area came with extremely strict conditions. So the prep started long before the drone ever lifted off the pad. The operation planning basically turned into a non-stop strategy session, with tables covered in satellite photos, old geological maps, and newly generated 3D terrain models. Because the mountain terrain around the suspected Sinai site in Saudi Arabia is sharp, uneven, and full of natural wind corridors, a normal drone path would never work. The team had to map out custom approach routes that avoided sudden altitude drops, narrow canyons, and magnetic anomalies that could throw off the drone's sensor alignments. The big goal was simple: get the drone as low as safely possible without crashing it. But simple doesn't always translate well in real mountains. If the drone dipped too low, it risked clipping a ridge or getting pulled sideways by a gust. If it flew too high, the clarity of the underground data would be useless. The planners had to work within half-meter tolerances, tight enough that even small mistakes could ruin the scans. Tech crews also pre-calibrated the drone's 100 times GPR array based on the exact mineral content of the region. As Section 1 explained, parts of the mountain are made from dark basalt and faintly conductive metamorphic layers, materials that normally weaken radar signals. To counter that, the team adjusted the power output, pulse, spacing, and receiver sensitivity before the drone was even moved into place. It wasn't about blasting more power into the ground, it was about tuning the pulse to slip into the natural gaps between the mineral layers. That tuning is what allowed the GPR to work where regular ground units failed. Once the environmental data was locked, the mission pilots built a flight path that looked like a woven net stretching over the top of the mountain. Think of it like mowing a lawn, except the lawn is jagged rock. The mower is flying, and the goal is to catch invisible underground shapes instead of trimming grass. They designed the grid in 3 layers. High-altitude passes were broad scans to establish the general subsurface profile. The drone stayed about 40 meters above the ridges, gathering wide, low-resolution sweeps to identify deeper pockets worth revisiting. Mid-level sweeps hovered between 10 and 15 meters, mapping slope faces and plateaus where the soil was thinner. This is where the drone's stabilization system had to work overtime, fighting gusts and microturbulence rolling down the mountain walls. Finally, the low-altitude close passes were the riskiest part. Flying just over a meter above the ground, the sensors picked up texture from the rock surfaces, producing the real revelations. Mount Sinai's Saudi side landscape added another layer of challenge. The heat alone messes with equipment, battery chemistry, and even air density that keeps drones stable. Midday temperatures could fry a consumer drone on the spot. That's why the team scheduled flights around sunrise and late afternoon, when the air was cooler. Even then, rocks radiating heat created shimmering distortion zones the sensors had to compensate for. Wind channels carved by millennia of airflow produced sudden gusts that could easily push a drone off course. The drone's AI stabilization system had to react faster than any human pilot could, keeping the GPR array level. And then there were the ridges, uneven cliffs that even the best terrain models struggled to predict. Downward-facing LiDAR became the drone's guardian angel, automatically raising it to avoid sudden ledges. The excitement didn't wait until the mission was complete. The first anomaly appeared during mid-level sweeps, a clean, geometric reflection near the base of a slope. Natural rock rarely forms straight lines. Then another signature appeared, a faint outline running parallel to an ancient path. As the drone descended for closer passes, the return signals sharpened into forms that hinted at layered foundations, void-like pockets, and linear formations buried under volcanic rubble. The team immediately recognized that this wasn't background noise. Something structured lay beneath the surface, and the drone was just starting to uncover it. Even partial scans of surrounding valleys, cliffs, and plateaus revealed patterns that weren't random boulders or erosion scars. Some cavities were deep enough to suggest ancient activity, buried under centuries of hardened rock. The drone produced full 3D renders, allowing researchers to rotate, slice, and zoom through the underground layers. These shapes aligned with long-held expectations of what might exist beneath Mount Sinai. While the team remained cautious, the evidence was clear. The mountain was far from empty. Whether you approach it from history, archaeology, or sheer curiosity, the scans proved one thing. Modern technology was finally revealing secrets that had been hidden for millennia. The mountain, already impressive above ground, had a story underground too. And the first mission was only the beginning. And then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. The data started showing exactly what had been hiding beneath the mountain all along. The confirmation, what the radar actually revealed. When the team finally began analyzing the data from the GPR drone, the first thing that struck them was clarity. Unlike past radar scans or surface surveys, these images didn't look like fuzzy blobs or random shadows. They were crisp, layered, and structured. The drone had penetrated deep into the mountain's volcanic rock and sediment, revealing features that hadn't been accessible before. And immediately, researchers noticed something remarkable: patterns beneath the mountain that aligned perfectly with what historical texts, oral traditions, and ancient travelers had suggested for centuries. It was as if the mountain had been quietly holding onto its secrets until someone finally asked the right questions with the right tools. The first significant findings were the layered cavities and elongated voids running along what appeared to be natural terraces. At first glance, they could have been geological formations, but the shapes were too deliberate. Some of the voids formed straight, parallel lines, a geometric precision almost unheard of in natural rock formations. When the drone's 3D modeling software stitched the scans together, the shapes became even more pronounced. Researchers could virtually walk through the underground map, noting pockets, alcoves, and what looked like passageways carved into the rock layers. Each layer revealed additional information, suggesting multiple periods of human or structured activity. Another astonishing detail was the depth of some of these formations. The drone had detected structures buried under meters of hardened volcanic rock, sediment, and ancient debris. These weren't surface cavities. They were deep, deliberate, and layered in a way that hinted at intentional placement or construction. According to the data, some of the underground features were aligned along natural contours of the mountain, while also following straight, angular patterns inconsistent with purely natural processes. That kind of dual alignment, both with the landscape and geometric design, is exactly what historians and archaeologists had hypothesized but never been able to confirm until now. The scans also revealed what appeared to be hidden pathways or corridors connecting several of the larger cavities. Some researchers speculated that these might have served as ancient routes for travelers or temporary shelters during historical journeys. Others noted that the placement of the voids near natural terraces could indicate ceremonial or functional use, though the drone could only provide structural information, not direct evidence of human activity. Still, the shapes and layouts were striking enough to suggest that Mount Sinai's underground landscape was far from random. One particularly fascinating discovery was a series of alcove-like formations that seemed to cluster near certain summit ridges. Viewed from above, these alcoves formed a pattern resembling an ancient courtyard or gathering space. While the drone couldn't determine their purpose, the spacing, size, and consistency suggested more than a purely natural origin. The fact that these formations had survived centuries of erosion, volcanic activity, and geological shifts only added to their significance. Researchers immediately compared them to old maps, traveler notes, and ancient texts. The alignment was uncanny. Almost all the features correlated with descriptions of resting points, camps, or sacred areas historically associated with Mount Sinai. Perhaps the most striking confirmation came when some of the radar signatures appeared in places previously thought inaccessible. Narrow ledges, steep terraces, and densely packed volcanic ridges all contained detectable cavities. In some cases, these cavities were large enough to suggest that they could have been used by groups of people. The radar's high resolution made it possible to distinguish between simple cracks and complex, enclosed spaces. Analysts could even estimate approximate volumes and depths of the cavities, providing the first accurate 3D blueprint of Mount Sinai's underground structure. These findings didn't just match historical records, they reinforced the idea that Mount Sinai had been an active location for human activity, observation, or ceremonial use far longer than many modern researchers had assumed. The GPR drone, with its unprecedented scanning power, gave evidence to a concept that had always existed in theory. Beneath the surface of this rugged, intimidating mountain lay a network of spaces that mirrored centuries-old narratives. It was as though the mountain itself was confirming what human memory had long preserved. The data also opened doors for interdisciplinary study. Geologists could now examine how the rock formations interacted with the voids. Archaeologists had a precise map to plan future on-ground explorations. Even historians were intrigued. These underground spaces provided physical confirmation of descriptions that had only existed in manuscripts or oral traditions. The drone had effectively bridged centuries of speculation and modern scientific observation in one sweep. Of course, the team remained cautious. The drone revealed structure and shape, but it couldn't directly confirm use, age, or cultural significance. However, for the first time, researchers could say with confidence that Mount Sinai in Saudi Arabia wasn't just a legendary peak. It was a mountain with hidden underground complexity that corroborated centuries of recorded knowledge. The 100 times stronger GPR system didn't invent history. It simply made visible what had been invisible all along. By the end of the mission, the team had a wealth of high-resolution maps, 3D models, and datasets that would take months, even years, to fully analyze. The initial confirmation, though, was enough to capture worldwide attention. The mountain had quietly held its secrets for millennia, and finally, technology had caught up. It wasn't a matter of belief versus skepticism anymore. The underground data made one thing undeniable. Mount Sinai's Saudi-side ridges held structures and formations that confirmed long-standing historical and traditional accounts, now visible thanks to a drone and radar system unlike anything previously deployed in the region. And while modern drones are uncovering the mountain's secrets, the story of the first explorers who noticed them is just as fascinating. People even say, "Give the man the credit." The story of Ron Wyatt. You can't talk about Mount Sinai and hidden underground formations without mentioning Ron Wyatt, a name that comes up again and again in discussions about unexplored archaeological sites in the Middle East. Whether you love him, doubt him, or just find the story wild, his life and work are undeniably intertwined with the idea that the region holds secrets people rarely get to see. Wyatt wasn't a professional archaeologist. In fact, he came from a medical background. He was a nurse anesthetist. But what he had was curiosity, persistence, and a flair for noticing things that others walked past. Wyatt started exploring ancient sites in the Middle East in the 70s. He claimed to have investigated locations connected to biblical events, including Noah's Ark, the Red Sea crossing, and of course, Mount Sinai. While many researchers dismissed him as a maverick, a handful of explorers and enthusiasts found his claims compelling, partly because he was willing to go where most people wouldn't. For decades, he traveled to rugged deserts, climbed mountains, and documented caves, rock formations, and unusual subsurface structures, often on a shoestring budget. One of the things that made Wyatt's story stick was his method. Unlike standard archaeology teams, which require permissions, formal grids, and careful excavation permits, Wyatt operated in a guerrilla-style fashion. He combined field observation, notes from historical texts, and his own intuition about where structures might be. On Mount Sinai in Saudi Arabia, he reportedly noticed patterns in the rocks, ledges, and cave openings that hinted at human activity long before modern technology could confirm anything. While skeptics argued that his interpretations were often subjective, supporters point out that some of the features he documented later aligned with what advanced radar and drone surveys began revealing decades later. Wyatt's discoveries were always controversial. Newspapers and academic journals rarely covered them, and he faced harsh criticism from mainstream archaeologists, many of whom considered his claims exaggerated or impossible. But Wyatt didn't care much about validation from the establishment. He was focused on uncovering, recording, and sharing his observations. Maps, hand-drawn sketches, photographs, and reports were all part of his toolkit. And over the years, these materials became valuable reference points for future explorers who wanted to investigate the same areas with modern technology. One of the most famous aspects of Wyatt's work was his connection to what he described as hidden underground structures in the Sinai region. Long before the best GPR drone was flying over Saudi Arabia, Wyatt reported cavities, tunnels, and formations under the mountains that seemed to indicate human construction. Of course, critics quickly pointed out that there was no solid evidence at the time, no peer-reviewed papers, no high-resolution imaging, no on-site confirmation from independent archaeologists. But the locations he chose and the features he highlighted often overlapped with sites that later researchers, including drone teams, found worthy of investigation. In other words, Wyatt's intuition was unusually spot on, even if it couldn't stand alone as proof. Wyatt also had a knack for storytelling. Part of his appeal came from the way he blended legend, local lore, and first-hand observation. He didn't just point at a rock formation and say, "Look at this." He framed it in a narrative. These were places where ancient travelers might have rested, where events described in religious texts could have unfolded, where patterns in the landscape were more than coincidence. Whether you buy into the story or not, it's hard to ignore how he painted a mental picture of the terrain that made people want to explore it themselves. Another key part of Wyatt's legacy is the way he inspired amateur and professional researchers alike to look at the Arabian Sinai differently. For decades, mainstream academia largely ignored Saudi Arabia's northwest mountains in Mount Sinai debates, favoring the traditional Sinai Peninsula. Wyatt's work, controversial as it was, kept attention on the region. When modern radar and drone technology arrived, researchers suddenly had the tools to examine areas Wyatt had been describing with nothing but notebooks, sketches, and intuition. In a way, he laid the conceptual groundwork, even if he couldn't provide the hard data himself. Of course, not every claim Wyatt made stood the test of scrutiny. Some were later debunked or disproven, and many of his supposed discoveries remain highly disputed. But the core story, his focus on hidden underground structures in the Saudi Sinai region, the careful observations he made of the landscape, and the sheer audacity of exploring remote and dangerous terrain remains compelling. His work represents a bridge between old-school exploration and modern scientific validation. By the time he passed away in 1999, Ron Wyatt had left behind a complicated legacy. To some, he was a pioneer of bold, unconventional archaeology. To others, he was a controversial figure who mixed fact, legend, and personal interpretation. Either way, his name became synonymous with the idea that Mount Sinai might hold hidden structures, and that intuition, curiosity, and relentless fieldwork could point modern technology in the right direction. Today, with drone-mounted GPR systems confirming the existence of underground formations in the Saudi side mountains, Wyatt's earlier observations are being revisited, not as proof, but as a fascinating precursor to what advanced scanning technology is finally revealing. Whether you see him as a visionary or an eccentric explorer, one thing is undeniable. Wyatt's story reminds us that discovery doesn't always start in a lab. Sometimes it begins with a notebook, a hunch, and the courage to climb mountains that no one else dares to climb. And for Mount Sinai, the echoes of Wyatt's work can still be felt in every layer of rock that the 100 times GPR drone now maps with precision. What comes next for the region and for archaeology? With the first scans complete and the modern GPR drone proving its power, researchers are already looking ahead to the next phase of exploration. The initial data barely scratched the surface, literally. Plans are underway for expanded drone sweeps that will cover not just the main ridges of Mount Sinai, but the surrounding valleys, plateaus, and hidden canyons. By layering multiple scans over time, teams hope to create a complete, high-resolution map of the mountain's underground network. This kind of systematic imaging could reveal even smaller cavities, hidden channels, and structural anomalies that the first missions only hinted at. In addition to wider coverage, there are plans to push the technology even further. Deeper layer radar imaging is on the agenda, using enhanced signal processing to detect features buried under thicker layers of rock and sediment. These follow-up sweeps will target areas that were too risky or too deep during the initial missions. By gradually increasing depth and resolution, the team hopes to distinguish between natural formations and human-altered spaces with greater confidence. Every additional layer of data will add clarity to what's been a long-standing archaeological mystery. Field expeditions will also return to the region, guided by the drone's maps. Survey teams are preparing to explore the valleys, cliffs, and hidden terraces identified by the scans. Unlike early explorations that relied heavily on guesswork and intuition, these missions will be informed by precise radar data. Researchers can plan safer routes, focus on the most promising areas, and minimize environmental impact while maximizing the chances of uncovering tangible evidence of past activity. Beyond Mount Sinai, the implications for archaeology are huge. The success of drone-mounted, high-powered GPR scanning demonstrates a new way to study deserts, mountains, and remote landscapes that were previously inaccessible. Ancient sites buried under sand, lava, or volcanic rock could now be explored without heavy excavation or invasive digging. Every discovery in Saudi Arabia will refine the methods and inspire similar projects in other ancient desert regions worldwide. These advances aren't just about technology, they're about connecting with history in a way that was impossible before. Modern tools allow us to see stories that have been hidden for millennia, bridging the gap between legends, records, and physical reality. Mount Sinai is just the beginning. With drones, radar, and precise mapping, archaeologists are rewriting the way we approach ancient landscapes, uncovering the past layer by layer without ever disturbing its secrets. If you loved this deep dive, hit subscribe and stay tuned. There's plenty more hidden history waiting to be uncovered.